measured, composed. My name is Diane Hargrove. I am 38 years old. I am a licensed real estate attorney in Atlanta, Georgia, and I am, as of 14 months ago, the sole owner of a real estate brokerage that my ex-husband and I built together over 7 years, a brokerage that he spent the final 2 years of our marriage quietly trying to transfer out of my name. Flatly, firm, he did not succeed. Precise, he did not succeed because I am a real estate attorney, and real estate attorneys read documents for a living, and I read the document he thought I had not seen on a Thursday evening in February, sitting at my kitchen counter while he was on a work trip to Charlotte that was not, as I later confirmed, actually a work trip to Charlotte. Wry, self-aware, but I am getting ahead of myself. Settling into the story, let me go back to the beginning, because the beginning is where you understand how a woman who reads contracts for a living ended up inside one she did not fully audit for 2 years. Reflective, warm, I grew up in Decatur, just east of Atlanta. My mother was a paralegal. My father ran a small insurance agency from an office on Ponce de Leon Avenue for 30 years. I grew up watching both of them work, the specific, unhurried competence of people who understood their fields completely and did not need to perform that understanding for anyone. Matter of fact, I went to Georgia State for undergrad, Georgia State for law school, passed the bar on my first attempt, and went to work at a real estate law firm in Midtown where I spent 5 years learning every mechanism by which property can change hands, be encumbered, be transferred, or be taken. Confident, professional. I know how title works. I know how deeds work. I know how LLCs can be structured to hold real estate assets in ways that look like one thing and operate like another. Pointed. This is relevant. I am telling you this so that what comes next makes sense in the specific way that I need it to make sense, not as the story of a naive woman who didn't know better, but as the story of a woman who absolutely knew better and who made the specific human error of applying her professional skepticism everywhere except to the person she loved. Narrating, personal. I met Kevin Hargrove at a real estate industry networking event in Buckhead when I was 28. He was 32. He had been working as a residential real estate agent for 4 years and was, by every measure that matters at that kind of event, good at it. Warmly, recalling, he was personable. He was handsome. He understood the business. He talked about real estate the way I talked about real estate, with genuine enthusiasm for the mechanics of it, the deal making, the way a transaction comes together when everything is structured correctly. Matter of fact, we dated for 1.5 years. We married when I was 30. We talked, in the serious way of two people who both worked in real estate and understood the financial architecture of a well-structured life, about building something together. Explaining, the brokerage was Kevin's idea. He had the real estate license, the agent relationships, the client-facing energy. I had the legal background, the transaction knowledge, the ability to structure the business correctly from day one. Together, we would be stronger than either of us separately. Quietly, he was right about that. We were stronger together. Factual, professional. The brokerage opened in 2019. We called it Hargrove Property Group. I structured it as an LLC, Georgia LLC, properly formed, properly capitalized. The membership was divided 60% to me, 40% to Kevin, reflecting the fact that I had provided the majority of the startup capital from savings I had accumulated over 5 years of practice. Kevin had provided his book of business and his license. Firmly, the allocation was fair. We both knew it was fair. Honest, thoughtful. I want to be honest about those first 3 years, because the honesty matters for the rest. Warm, sincere. The first 3 years were good. Not just in a business sense, in a marriage sense. Kevin and I worked well together. He ran the agents, managed the client relationships, kept the energy in the office that a brokerage requires. I handled the legal side, the transactions, the compliance, the contracts that every deal generated. We had different strengths and we used them. The business grew. By the end of year 3, we had 11 agents, a second office location in Alpharetta, and revenue that neither of us had individually earned before. Proud, firm, I was proud of what we had built. I am still proud of it, because what we built was real and it was good, and the fact that Kevin spent the following 2 years trying to dismantle my ownership of it does not change what we created in the 3 years before. Shifting, thoughtful. The change in Kevin came gradually enough that I did not clock it as a change for a long time. I clocked it as stress. The market had tightened in 2021. Interest rates were climbing. Transaction volume was down across the board, and down market stress in a brokerage shows up in specific ways: agents leaving for competitors, clients getting cold feet, deals falling through at the last minute. Tired, Kevin was managing all of that from the front lines and I was managing it from the legal and operational side, and we were both under pressure. Gently, rationalizing, I told myself that the distance I felt, the specific new quality of his attention when I talked to him, the conversations that had stopped being fully present, was the distance that pressure produces. I had seen it in colleagues. I had read about it. I told myself it was temporary and that it would pass when the market settled. Flatly, I was wrong about what it was. Precise, recalling. The first thing I noticed that I could not explain as stress was in the fall of 2022. I was reviewing our operating agreement, something I did periodically as a matter of practice, not because I was suspicious but because I am a real estate attorney and reviewing operating agreements is what I do, and I found a provision that had been amended. A minor provision, or it appeared minor. It concerned the process by which membership interests could be transferred. Explaining, careful, the original provision, which I had drafted myself, required unanimous consent of all members for any transfer of membership interest. The amended version, and it had been amended, I could see the version history in the document management system we used, required only majority consent. Flatly, weighted, the amendment was dated 8 months earlier. Slowly, pointed, I had not approved an amendment to our operating agreement 8 months earlier. Repeating, deliberate, I had not been asked to approve an amendment to our operating agreement 8 months earlier. Pause, quietly, I sat with that for a long time. Controlled, professional, I did not say anything to Kevin that day. I am a lawyer. I do not act on incomplete information. I had a finding. I needed more findings before I understood what the finding meant. Methodical, I began, in the careful, quiet way of a woman who has spent her professional life reading documents, to read everything. Listing, precise, I reviewed every filing our registered agent had made on behalf of the LLC in the previous 18 months. I reviewed every banking record I had access to. I reviewed the company email account, which I had access to as a member and officer of the company. I reviewed the document management system's full version history for every core document. Grave, what I found, over the following 3 weeks, built a picture I had not been looking for and did not want to see. Explaining, precise, Kevin had, over the course of approximately 18 months, been laying the groundwork for a transfer of control of Hargrove Property Group away from me. The operating agreement amendment was one piece. There were others, a set of conversations in the company email with an attorney I did not know, a series of draft documents that had not yet been filed, an inquiry to a business broker about valuation methodology that would have been relevant if, for example, someone were attempting to buy out an unwilling partner at below market value. Pointed, precise, none of it had been executed yet. The transfers had not happened. The buyout had not been filed. What I was looking at was a plan, not a completed act. Firmly, but it was a very detailed plan. And it had been in development for 18 months. Quietly, I sat at my home office desk for a long time after I understood the full picture. Decisive. Then I did what I do when I have a complete set of facts and need to decide what to do with them. Factual. I called my colleague Patricia Weston. Narrating. Patricia is a business litigation attorney at a firm in Midtown. She is 51 years old and has been practicing for 25 years, and she has, in that time, seen every variety of business dispute that Atlanta's real estate market generates. She is the person I call when I need someone who has no emotional investment in the situation and complete professional investment in the outcome. Recalling. I called her on a Friday morning. I told her what I had found. Pause. Patricia was quiet for a moment. Voice. Patricia, gentle but direct. She said, Diane. Before we talk about the business, I want to ask you something. Voice. Diane. I said, ask. Voice. Patricia. Careful. She said, are you safe? Voice. Diane. Steady. I said, yes. Kevin is not that kind of person. This is a financial situation, not a physical one. Voice. Patricia. Brisk. Professional. She said, okay. Then let me tell you what you have. Voice. Patricia. Precise. Legal. She said, what you have is evidence of an attempt to modify the governance structure of a jointly owned LLC without the knowledge or consent of the co-member. Depending on the full documentary record, that may constitute a breach of fiduciary duty. The amendment to the operating agreement, if made without your consent, may be voidable. The fact that no transfer has been executed yet is actually an advantage. You have time to act before the damage is done rather than after. Voice. Patricia. Gentler. She said, I want to ask you something else. Voice. Diane. I said, yes. Voice. Patricia. Quiet. She said, do you want to save the marriage? Reflective. Slow. I looked at my office wall. On it, there was a framed photograph of Kevin and me at the Hargrove Property Group opening day. We were both laughing at something. I cannot remember now what we were laughing at. We looked, in that photograph, like two people who had built something good and were happy about it. Voice. Diane. Quiet. Resolved. I said, Patricia. I don't think the marriage I thought I had still exists. I think I have been living in a different marriage than the one I believed I was in for the last 2 years. Voice. Patricia. Firm. She said, then we proceed. Shifting. Heavier. I want to tell you about the Charlotte trip, because the Charlotte trip is the part that confirmed the second thing, the thing that is separate from the business, but that explains the first thing in a way that nothing else does. Factual. Kevin was in Charlotte for 2 nights, he said, for a conference. I had seen the conference on the shared calendar. I had not paid particular attention to it. Narrating. Building. On the second evening of the trip, I had a call from a client that ran long, and I missed a dinner with a friend, and I came home to an empty house, and I opened the laptop to catch up on emails, and I found, in the company email account that I had been monitoring since October, a message thread I had not seen before. It was in a folder I had not known existed, created with a name that was designed to look like a spam filter folder, the kind of folder name that a person who does not fully understand how email monitoring works would think was invisible. Flatly, cold, the thread was between Kevin and a woman named Celeste who worked at a real estate firm in Charlotte. Pause. The thread was 18 months old. Quietly, I read it to the end. Measured. Boundary setting. I am not going to describe the content in detail because the content is not the point. The point is that the Charlotte trip was not a conference. The point is that the business plan I had found, the attempt to restructure my ownership, to reduce my control, to position himself for a buyout, had a context I had not fully understood until that moment. Pointed, cold clarity. Kevin was not trying to take the business because the business was struggling. Kevin was trying to take the business because Kevin was planning to leave, and he wanted to leave with as much of what we had built as he could take. Slow, quiet. I sat in my kitchen in Atlanta on a Wednesday evening and I looked at the email thread on my laptop, and I felt something I did not have a word for at the time. Not rage. Not grief. Exactly. The specific cold clarity of a situation that has just become completely, irreversibly legible. Firmly, I closed the laptop. Factual, I called Patricia. Voice, Diane. I said, Patricia. I need to add a dimension to our conversation. Voice, Patricia. She said, tell me. Voice, Diane. Controlled. I said, the business plan has a personal context. Kevin is having an affair. He has been for 18 months. I believe the restructuring plan and the affair are related, that he was planning to exit the marriage and was attempting to position himself advantageously in the business before doing so. Pause. Patricia was quiet for a moment. Voice, Patricia. Serious. She said, Diane. I want you to listen to me carefully. Voice, Diane. I said, I'm listening. Voice, Patricia. Precise. Legal. She said, what you have just described changes the legal picture in two important ways. First, in Georgia, marital misconduct is relevant to equitable division of marital assets. Second, and this is more immediately relevant to the business, an attempt by one member of an LLC to restructure ownership for personal advantage, without the knowledge of the co-member, in the context of a plan to exit the marriage, gives us a significantly stronger position than we would have had with the business issue alone. Voice, Patricia. Firm. She said, I need you to do one thing right now. Voice, Diane. I said, tell me. Voice, Patricia. Direct. She said, do not confront Kevin. Not tonight. Not this week. I need time to prepare our position before he knows we have it. Can you do that? Voice, Diane. Steady. I said, yes. Reflective, wise. I had learned this lesson from Patricia, and from every client I had ever counseled in a real estate dispute. The person who acts first from emotion loses the advantage they did not know they had. Patience is not passive. Patience is the construction of an unassailable position before the other party knows the construction is happening. Flatly, I was patient for 6 weeks. Factual, methodical. In those 6 weeks, Patricia and her team built a comprehensive legal record. They documented the operating agreement amendment and its invalidity. They documented the valuation inquiry and what it implied. They documented the email thread with Celeste, not to use it emotionally, but to establish the timeline and motive for the business restructuring. They retained a forensic accountant to review the company's financials for any undisclosed transfers or unexplained expenses over the previous 18 months. They found 3 unexplained expense items, totaling just over $14,000, that had been run through the company accounts over 18 months with vendor descriptions that did not correspond to any vendor in our records. Voice, Patricia. Patricia said, in a divorce proceeding with asset division, this is going to matter. Voice, Diane. I said, I know. Voice, Patricia. She said, are you ready? Voice, Diane. Firm. I said, I have been ready for 6 weeks. Narrating, tense. Kevin came home on a Sunday evening to find me sitting at the kitchen table with Patricia and a colleague of hers. There were documents on the table. Kevin looked at the documents. He looked at me. His face did something I recognized from 7 years of marriage, the specific shift of a man who has been caught in the process he thought he was concealing, by the person he thought he was concealing it from. Voice, Kevin. Quiet. Court. He said, Diane. Voice, Diane. Controlled. Final. I said, sit down. Kevin. I'd like you to meet my attorney. Transitioning, matter of fact, the divorce took 9 months. Measured, I will not give you the full procedural account, partly because it is long and partly because some of its terms are confidential. What I will tell you is what mattered. Factual, listing outcomes. The operating agreement amendment was voided. My 60% membership interest was confirmed and protected. The 3 unexplained expense items were characterized as dissipation of marital assets, which in Georgia affects equitable division. Kevin's attempt to position himself for an advantageous buyout became instead the documentation that ensured the buyout, when it happened on terms that reflected the actual value of the business and the actual history of who had built it. Matter of fact, Kevin left Hargrove Property Group. It was a condition of the settlement that made sense for both of us. The business could not function with both of us in it after what had happened, and Kevin understood this, and his attorney helped him understand the specific disadvantage of contesting it given the documentary record. Firm, resolved, I retained the brokerage. I retained the name. I thought about changing it. I decided not to, because Hargrove is my name too. I had it before Kevin and I have it after, and because what the name represents, to the 11 agents who work there and to the clients who have worked with us for 5 years, is the business we built, and the business we built is real regardless of what one of the people who built it chose to do with his private life. Warm, satisfied, the brokerage is doing well. We opened a 3rd location in Marietta in January. I promoted 2 of the agents to senior roles that I had been holding open since the restructuring was complete. The forensic accountant who worked on the divorce case now does our annual financial review. Flatly, indifferent. Celeste, I was told by a mutual professional contact, is no longer with Kevin. I did not ask for details. I did not need them. Calm, closing this chapter. Kevin and I are not in contact beyond what the business transition required. I hold no animosity toward him that I carry into my daily life. Carrying animosity takes energy that I prefer to spend on the business and on the people in it. Reflective, opening up. I want to tell you what I have been thinking about in the 14 months since the divorce was finalized, because the thinking is the part that stays with me. Thoughtful. I have been thinking about the operating agreement. Precise. Not the amended one, the original. The one I drafted in 2019, the year we opened. I drafted that agreement with the same professional care I gave every document I produced for clients. Unanimous consent required for membership transfers. Clear fiduciary duties. Specific provisions for what happens if the members cannot agree. I built those protections into the agreement because I understood, professionally, that relationships change and that documents need to reflect the long-term interest of the business and its owners, not just the goodwill of the current moment. Firmly, I built those protections into the agreement. Quietly, self-aware, and then I never audited them again for 3 years. Honest, vulnerable, I trusted the document I had made and I stopped checking it. I checked my clients' documents. I checked my colleagues' transactions. I read every contract that came through my desk with the full skepticism of a professional who has seen what happens when documents are not read carefully. Slowly, admitting, I did not apply that skepticism to my own business. I did not apply it because applying it would have required applying it to my marriage, and applying it to my marriage would have meant acknowledging that I might be inside a situation that required the kind of careful documentation I reserved for adversarial contexts. Quiet. I did not want to be in an adversarial context with my husband. Flatly. I understand now that I already was. Direct, addressing the audience. This is the thing I want to say to the women watching tonight who are also professionally competent and who are also, perhaps, giving the person they love a kind of trust they would never extend in a professional context. Firm, advising. Your professional instincts exist for a reason. The things you check at work, the documents, the timelines, the paper trail, the version history, exist because the world is full of situations where good intentions are not enough and where the record is the only thing that tells the truth. Pointed. Your personal life is not exempt from that. Gentle but firm. Not because the people you love are adversaries, but because the record is how you protect yourself when the relationship you thought you were in turns out to be different from the one you actually are in. Emphasizing. Direct advice. Build the record. Review the documents. Know what your name is on and what it is not on. Know the version history of the things that matter. Not because you expect betrayal. Because you are a professional, and professionals document. Measured. Returning to composure. I am Diane Hargrove. I am 38 years old. I am a real estate attorney in Atlanta, Georgia. Firmly. My name is on the brokerage. Firmly. My name is on the operating agreement. Quietly proud. My name has been on both since the day they were created. Resolute. And they are still mine. Settling. That is the whole story. Quietly. That is everything. Shifting. Softer. More vulnerable. I want to go back to the 6 weeks, because the 6 weeks are the part of this story I have thought about most. Quietly. 6 weeks of knowing. Heavier. 6 weeks of coming home to a house I shared with a man who thought he was managing a situation, while I was building the record that would resolve it. Honest. Vulnerable. I want to be honest about what those 6 weeks cost, because I think the honest account is more useful than the clean one. Tired. Personal. The 6 weeks cost sleep. I am not a person who has historically had trouble sleeping. I can take a difficult day of work and set it down at the bedroom door the way I have learned to set down client problems, the specific practiced discipline of a professional who understands that worrying at 10 o'clock does not improve the outcome at 10 the next morning. But those 6 weeks I did not sleep well, because the problem was not a client problem and it did not stay at the bedroom door. Quietly. It came in with me. Unsettling. Precise. Kevin was present in those 6 weeks in the specific way he had been present for the previous 2 years. Engaged enough, warm enough, present enough that I could not, if I had not known what I knew, have identified anything wrong. He asked how my day was. He made dinner on Tuesdays because Tuesday had been his dinner night for 4 years. He watched television on the couch in the evenings and fell asleep with his feet on the coffee table the way he always had. Detached. Observing. I watched all of this from the specific vantage point of a person who has seen the documentary record. Thoughtful. Opening up. I want to tell you what that is like, because I think it is important and I have not seen it described accurately in the stories I have heard from other women in similar situations. Vivid. Unsettling. It is like watching a performance you know is a performance without the performer knowing you know. The performance itself has not changed. Kevin was doing exactly what Kevin had always done. But it was now legible in a way it had not been before, each warmth a calculated warmth, each ordinary Tuesday dinner a piece of the story he was telling about a normal marriage, a story designed to keep me from looking at the documents he thought I had not seen. Quiet. Aching. The specific cost of those 6 weeks was not the knowing. The knowing was, in its own terrible way, a relief. The specific relief of having the picture complete. The cost was watching the performance and not being able to say, imagined, held back, I see you. I have the documents. I know what you have been doing. Firmly, disciplined. I could not say it because Patricia was right that the advantage was in the waiting. I am a professional. I kept the advantage. Quietly, but at cost. Shifting, warmer. I also want to tell you about my mother. Fond, narrating. My mother, the paralegal, called me during those 6 weeks on a Sunday afternoon. She calls on Sunday afternoons, has since I left for college, the same Sunday afternoon call for 20 years. I have never missed one. I did not miss this one. Light, ordinary. We talked about the usual things. Her garden, a case she had been working on, a cousin's upcoming wedding. I said the things that needed to be said to make the call sound like the call it always was. Gentle. And then she said, voice, mother, tender, Diane, honey. Is everything okay? Reflective, admiring. My mother has been a paralegal for 32 years. She reads people the way I read documents, not because she is suspicious, but because she has learned, across decades of professional practice, what it looks like when something is not quite right in the thing in front of her. Voice, Diane, controlled. I said, everything is fine, Mom. Pause, there was a pause. Voice, mother, quiet, knowing. She said, you know where I am if you need me. Voice, Diane, soft. I said, I know. Narrating, tender. I told her 3 days after Kevin left. I drove to Decatur and sat at her kitchen table, the same kitchen table where I had done homework for 18 years, and I told her the whole story. The operating agreement. The Charlotte trip. The email thread. Patricia. The 6 weeks. Warmly, she listened to all of it. She did not cry. She is not a woman who cries easily, which is where I get it from. Pause. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Voice, mother, direct, practical. Then she said, did you protect the business? Voice, Diane. I said, yes. Voice, mother, simple. She said, good. Voice, mother, warm, grinding. She said, the rest of it, Kevin, Charlotte, all of that will take time. But the business is what you built. The business is what you can control. I'm glad it's protected. Gentle. Then she got up and made coffee. Quietly, moved. That was the conversation. It was enough. It was, in the specific language of women who have been raised to understand that competence is a form of love, exactly what I needed. Shifting, reflective closing. I want to tell you one more thing before I finish, something about the brokerage itself, and about the Sunday morning for months after the divorce was finalized when I walked into the Midtown office alone, before anyone else arrived, at about 7:30 in the morning. Quiet, vivid. The office was quiet. The desks were clean. The whiteboards from the previous week's team meetings still had the listing pipeline on them. 16 active listings, 7 under contract, 4 in closing. On the far wall, there was a framed version of our brokerage mission statement that I had written in the first year. We represent our clients' interests completely, in every transaction, without exception. Slowly, I stood in that office for a while. Reflective, warm, I thought about the year we opened, Kevin and me and 2 agents and a rented conference room we had not yet been able to afford to furnish properly. I thought about the second year, when we made our first significant hire and the business started to feel like what I had imagined it could be. I thought about the third year, which was the best year we had together, before whatever changed had changed. Quiet. I thought about Patricia at the kitchen table with her colleague and the documents. Thoughtful. I thought about the operating agreement, original version, the one I had drafted with unanimous consent required and fiduciary duties clearly defined and specific provisions for disagreement. Warm, gathering. I thought about what my mother had said, the business is what you built. The business is what you can control. Firmly. She was right. Settled, resolute. I sat at my desk, the one with my name on the door of the office behind it, and I opened my laptop and I started the week. Calm, closing, 16 active listings. 7 under contract. 4 in closing.